Well, welcome to Scam of the Week, and there is a lot to be getting on with in this week's edition. There's another big snowy hydro blowout. There's the Bondi Anti-Semitism Royal Commission interim report. There's Pauline's plane. Pauline was given her very own jet by Gina Reinhardt. There's Angus & Co. and the coalition, the usual chaos there, and there's Albo, dear Albo, totally, abjectly caving into the foreign gas cartel. Welcome to Scam of the Week. We're calling this edition the Owned Edition. Yes, they're all owned. Now, Pauline has set a new standard in being owned. A new standard in Australian federal politics this week by brazenly flaunting, grinning, Cheshire cat grins ear to ear, her jet given to her by Gina Reinhardt, the mining magnate.
It hasn't been an easy journey. I was elected 30 years ago to the Parliament, just straight out of my fish and chip shop, a business that I was proud to own, as a single parent to provide for my family. I'm a grassroots Australian. I love my country and I will carry through on what I intend to do for Australia.
Pauline has been a lone voice in the wilderness that has now become a chorus of millions. Your resilience is the fuel for the One Nation Party. This is about providing the wings for a movement that refuses to let the heart of this country be silenced. This aircraft is not for joyrides. This aircraft is for the battle for Australians. Let this plane be a symbol to every Australian that help is on its way, and the journey has only just begun.
Nobody is quite owned as blatantly as Pauline Hanson, One Nation Israel, and so it is very honest of Pauline, to be fair to Pauline. Well, actually, to be fair to Pauline, she does actually have a policy which we think they should all have, and that's on property. She says ban foreign ownership of property, residential property in Australia. That is a sound policy, because why should first homeowners struggling, especially as interest rates are about to go through the roof, struggling to get set in the property market, why should they have to compete with wealthy investors from overseas? Well done, Pauline Hanson, One Nation Israel. Pauline, however, on the graft front, has been breaking the rules so often by not disclosing her little journeys, her little outings on Gina's private fleet of jets, that she just got her own Gina plane. Cut out the middleman, just give her a plane to fly around the country, telling people with 4 teeth how great her policies are for people with 6 yachts. Let's face it, if there was truth in politics, all of them would have their own planes, adorned with their corporate sponsorships on them, because this is the problem in Australian politics, money, as it is elsewhere, US politics particularly. Now, Albo will be doing the rounds in his Exxon Chevron jet, co-sponsored by Pratt Industries. Maddie Canavan will be in the Australian Coal Association jet, proudly co-sponsored by the Minerals Council of Australia for the Nats. And Angus, of course, will be in his US Defence Contractors Company jet, sponsored also by the Business Council of Australia, because they just do what they're told with their donors. And this week was no exception from that rule when Albo did his massive swan diving backflip, or he never backflipped because he never committed to it, but basically ruling out a proposal that would have taxed Australia's most profitable industries, who are robbing us blind and have been for 2 decades, the gas exporters. But Matty Canavan had the best take on Gina. Yes, it was the very best take. He invoked an old share market saying. The old saying, said Matt, is that you sell your shares when the CEO buys a private jet. And that's it. It's all peaked. We've seen the apogee of Pauline. It's just too damn blatant. Meanwhile, Albo's capitulation of the gas industry was majestic. The gas exporters, 80% of our gas is exported, and a lot of it with no royalties. paid for the minerals that we Australians own, categorically ruling out imposing decent royalties and tax regime on these foreign gas exporters. So he joins the others, really, categorically representing his donor base and the foreign interests of people overseas over Australians owned Albo, owned by the gas exporters. But to give him and Jim their dues, the budget is coming soon, and he's facing a big backlash, if you haven't noticed it, in the mainstream for his looming budget measures, which finally, we give them credit for this, address two big problems. As we know, investors get a leg up over first-home owners in Australian property and residential property, and two reasons for that: a capital gains tax relief and negative gearing. And he's addressing that. We'll soon see what the actual measures are, but they've been largely leaked, or they've been flagged at least, and people are up in arms. The mainstream media is not happy about it because it may affect their own property prices. Nat Bar on 7, fretting about her luxury home portfolio. Here she is.
Looking at axing both negative gearing and reducing the capital gains tax discount by all accounts. Some of our top banks and economists say it won't improve housing affordability, but it will add $30 billion to your budget. Is it just really a cash grab?
Well, a couple of things about that, Nat. I mean, obviously, when we're only less than 2 weeks from the budget, there's always a lot of speculation, and I think particularly this time around, we haven't finished the budget yet, and so some of these sorts of deliberations haven't been concluded yet. But in principle, some of the changes that you're talking about, some of the changes that people have been reading about, would raise nowhere near the sorts of dollars that you just referenced in your question. And so we're working through these issues. We've been upfront with people and said that we think that there are issues in the housing market and in the tax system that we are working through. There are some issues of intergenerational fairness that we're very focused on.
Nat's $30 billion cash grab fear campaign. $30 billion cash grab. No, it's just adjusting the settings, Nat, to be fairer to all Australians, not just people with luxury property portfolios. Make Australia a more equal place. It's good to see that they're finally doing something about it. Plaudits for that. It won't, as usual, it won't be as good as perhaps we could expect, but they do appear to be doing something. So Budget Day will reveal that. It's a good idea to renose the residential property market in favour of owners rather than investors. So therefore, we will be hearing a lot of whinging in the next couple of weeks about the budget, because there are a lot of vested interests in the property sector that don't want this to happen. Now, what about that Royal Commission, the Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism, Special Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism, the Bondi Royal Commission, as it's monikered? So we had a quick nip through, not in detail, it's 169 pages, of the interim report from Justice Virginia Bell. And we did note that the G word was not mentioned once. The G, the little Holocaust going on at the moment. I managed not to mention the G word, but she did tread a fine line in service to social cohesion. Yes, the interim report by the Bondi Royal Commission recommends some procedural changes, and it found nobody really to blame except the perpetrators, the people that fired the bullets, which is fair. The Israel lobby was not happy because it didn't blame Sydney Harbour Bridge peace protesters or pro-Palestinian people. The security apparatus is not happy either because the findings pointed out that New South Wales police, well, these guys got their guns under the New South Wales gun regime, walked into a gun shop, despite the fact that ASIO had been investigating them, or one of them, in 2019. So it pointed the bone a little bit at the security apparatus, and there were warnings, actually, that this might happen, Bondi. So New South Wales and police and ASIO failings are brought to light. But of course, the actual central piece of evidence, the manifesto by Naveed Akram, one of the shooters, was, of course, some you to say, was not aired. They don't want that aired because the Sydney Morning Herald pointed out it basically is based on the fact that this guy was unhappy about Gaza. So they don't want that out there. The actual manifesto was left out. It has been redacted. But what about dear old Snowy Hydro, which is now going to cost us $42 billion? The costs are blown out from $2 billion original projections to $42 billion. That's a heck of a blowout. And as Rex Patrick, who's been on it from the start, trying to get transparency stuff out of government, he's been warning about the transparency issues around this. When he first started investigating and getting stonewalled, the costs had already blown out by $3.1 billion. And the coalition, meanwhile, was having a few blowouts of their own. Timmy Wilson's, the opposition Treasury spokesman, Timmy Wilson, somehow dropped $79.2 billion down the back of the Treasury couch when he was talking about how much money they were going to spend on defence to align with what the Donald wants Australia to spend to be part of the AUKUS alliance.
You would remember from this morning, the coalition announced that it wants to double Australia's fuel stocks, spending $800 million to do so. However, it seems the Shadow Treasurer may have missed the memo on exactly how much the opposition was promising. Here's Tim Wilson at a press conference earlier today, remembering the correct figure is $800 million.
Around $80 billion to be able to secure that capacity, but that's through financing mechanisms.
Tim, you're talking about, on one hand, the government spending too much money. You're talking about debt going through the roof, and on the other hand, you're now talking about $80 billion.
The gap is between understanding what we're actually doing and how we're trying to finance and provide the resources.
Tim, can I just confirm, where does that $80 billion figure come from?
Sorry, just to clarify. So my apologies. We got that. So
800 million.
800 million. Sorry, you throw me. Sorry, the 800 million figure.
It was 800 million, not 80 billion. But what's a few zeros when you're the coalition? It's only $79.2 billion out. Meanwhile, Albo, our PM, handed down his new media reform proposal. To date, the Digital Media Bargaining Code, which was brought in by Joshi Frydenberg, has effectively propped up fossil media. It transfers money from Google and Facebook and so on, from the platforms to the fossil media companies, but it doesn't actually have to be spent on journalism. It can be spent on anything, like executive salaries. So it just goes, and it's secret to news and so on. So we're having a bit of a tweak there, and that was announced by Albo this week. The deals will still apparently remain secret, and the cost of doing biz, in other words, paying Rupert and Nine Entertainment and The Guardian and the ABC and so on, propping them up. The platforms actually claim this as a cost of doing business, as they should. They do need to be looked at properly, but that's not happening. The platforms themselves and all their blatant infringement of privacy and so on. But the money doesn't go to journalism necessarily. The new thing is they're threatening them, and they're calling it an incentive now. And the media bargaining incentive. And effectively they're saying, well, if you don't make these payments to our fossil mates, we're going to fix this with the threat of a fund, 2.2% of your revenues. And Google doesn't even divulge its proper revenue numbers. It pretends that its revenue is a fraction of what it really is, and we don't know how the detail will be calculated. But it sounds sensible to set up a fund, and instead of giving all the money to Rupert and co in secret deals. So whether the indies, such as this channel and Michael West Media, get any money out of this, well, who knows? But if we are required to go to Google and bargain with Google to get our money from this global monopoly, we just won't bother, because why would they give it to us? We've been pinging them for multinational tax avoidance for 13 years. So they're not going to give us money. a little team like this one. Why would they? So if they set up a fund, which they probably won't, 2.2% of revenues, that would be good, but that is the threat, not the actuality at the moment. Now, meanwhile, the defence spokesman for the opposition, for the coalition, James Patterson, addressed the National Press Club this week, boasting about the LNP's plans to spend more money on defence, on AUKUS. But he ended up slightly miffed because he was asked, well, how are you going to, what are the costings? How are you going to fund this? Well, it doesn't matter when you're in opposition. You have to think about the real world. You just gunslinging ideas out there.
As you know, there is no point talking about this unless you identify, and you've clearly identified the costs of these programs. Where does the money come from? Yeah. Does it come from extra taxes, or does it come from other expenditure programs? You must have identified where the money can come from.
It's a very fair question, but one that you'll understand I cannot unilaterally answer today on behalf of my parliamentary colleagues, particularly the members of the Shadow Expenditure Review Committee. What we have said is we're committed to 3% of GDP in the old money. We'll have to reevaluate what that means under the new money, under the NATO standard, and we'll be transparent about that. And well before the next election, we'll demonstrate how it can be paid for. But we haven't made those decisions yet as a Shadow ERC. We've just made our intent very clear, and over the balance of the parliamentary term, we'll make our homework very clear so that it can be publicly scrutinised.
And so we copped a little bit of heat for that, little Jimmy Patterson. But I think for Scam of the Week, Virginia Bell. Now, she's done a good job in curbing, in addressing the social cohesion thing, and we can't really fault this report except for not mentioning the real problem here. The G word, 160 pages, no G word. So we're not sure how that curbs anti-Semitism or racism or implements social cohesion in the longer term. Not calling out a Holocaust, not calling out industrial scale land theft, murder, torture and so on, which is out of control. But it may be a reasonable short-term political fix. So welcome, come on down, Virginia Bell, for your first Scam of the Week. Well played, good scam. We'll look forward to the final findings. Let's hope that they're more forthright in identifying what the real problem is here. If you'd like to find out what the real problem is, read Andrew Brown this week and his pieces on the Israel lobby and foreign interference in Australia. They are exceptional. They go straight to the problem. We always try to tell the truth here at Michael West Media. We don't always get it right, but we endeavour to get it right, and we base it on evidence rather than agendas. We'd like to thank Island Optical and Optical Superstores, our silver corporate sponsors for this channel, and we'd like to thank everybody on Patreon and on the website for supporting our independent journalism. Please hit the bell, like, share and comment, join up, become a sponsor if you can, if you've got any lazy dollars, and we'll see you on the next outing.